Welcome to the Saturday Cadence podcast. I'm Blake Biscardi, and remember, the Saturday Cadence podcast is the heartbeat of college football. We've got one of the biggest college football games in its history as a season opener. Ohio State hosting Texas. This is a number 1 versus number 2, or number 1 versus number 3 showdown, depending on which poll you are looking at. Welcome into a special episode of Saturday Cadence, the heartbeat of college football. We've got a full preview show on Ohio State, Texas. Blake Biscardi, your host here, alongside David Wertheim and Grant Kincaid. Guys, a lot to get into today. This is a massive, massive game. It's on Fox, big noon kickoff. Lee Corso's final college game day is going to proceed. We've got a rematch of the Cotton Bowl last year, college football playoff semifinal. Like I said, biggest opener in college football history. David, looking at this game, storylines galore. We've been talking about this since last year. I mean, the build up to this game, I can't really think of one to open a season that's had more than the Buckeyes and the Longhorns are getting before this game kicks off at 12:14 on Saturday morning.
Yeah, this is an exciting one to open the season for sure. And obviously, these two teams have met early in the season before, about 20 years ago at this point, which is crazy to think about. And it was dramatic then, it was dramatic last year, and it'll probably be dramatic again on Saturday. So really excited for this one. Top 2 battle early in the season. Hard to beat that, and I think it'll live up to it.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's you see all the clips from last year, obviously. So there's a lot of Jack Sawyer on your screen, leading up to the game, just highlights from that game. But it's kind of this new chapter. See Arch Manning and what he can do in a hostile environment, regardless of the time of the game.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then one thing we want to focus on, too, just to start, because we're going to break this down by offense, defense. We're going to start with the head coaches here. Ryan Day wins a national championship. He's now getting benefit of the doubt, but he still has a little bit of pressure on him. He still has to beat Michigan. I know he can't do anything about that game in this game, but for Ryan Day, even coming off of a national championship, still facing a little bit of pressure here, because at Ohio State, David, I know we talk about this ad nauseum, you're expected to win every game. Ryan Day says that he knows the expectations. You are expected to win every single game. It doesn't matter that you just had 14 players drafted to the NFL. You have a new first-time starting quarterback, transfers on your offensive line, new running backs. None of that matters to Ohio State fans. You are expected to beat Texas week 1 when shoe hits leather at 12:14 in the shoe. Steve Sarkisian, on the other hand, he's lost in the college football playoff semifinals 2 years ago, or 2 years in a row, rather. David, you outlined this perfectly, how there's been a steady ascent in the Texas program with Sarkisian. They just need to take that next step. Now, this game doesn't mean Texas cannot win a national championship or win the SEC, win or lose, but it's a good measuring stick game. It's a great barometer at the beginning of the season, because I think of the two coaches, Steve Sarkisian needs to win this game more than Ryan Day does. So how do you look at the comparison between the two head coaches, the pressures and the expectations that they're facing heading into this game?
Well, in this game specifically, Ryan Day obviously got the first one back in the college football playoff and beating Steve Sarkisian, 1-0 against Steve Sarkisian. And, that's pretty critical. Obviously, early it was, a win or go home type game. And that's not the case this time. I think these teams are going to look very different when we get to November, as opposed to how they'll look on Saturday. And I think that that's one of the benefits for both of these coaches, really, is that you get to play that high stakes, high pressure environment early in the season when there's still a lot to play for. You can kind of make up ground. And, in week 13, week 12, if Ohio State's sitting there 11-1, their only losses to Texas in opening week, it is what it is. You kind of look past that. And same goes for Texas. If you're sitting here SEC champions, but you have an early season loss to Ohio State, it's like, okay, well, that's what you get for playing in this tough game, and we'll reward you for that. And I think the committee has emphasized that. So, for both of these coaches, like you said, it's a good measuring stick. I do think there is a little bit more pressure on Steve Sarkisian. They brought in the number 1 recruiting class again. They've been in the college football playoff 2 years in a row, like you said, losing in the semis both times. So there is some pressure on him to get off on the right foot. But at the same time, these teams will look a lot different in November. And just playing this game early in the season means a lot.
Yeah, I have to say, I agree with how David kind of said that these teams are going to look a lot different late in the year, particularly, obviously, because of the quarterback position. Maybe Arch, might get off to a little better start, but who knows? It's just one of those games where you're seeing quarterbacks make decisions in games that they have never had to do so in. So um, obviously, pressure wise, Arch, Sarkisian, maybe a little more on them. Sark hasn't, broken through to the championship game, and obviously there's the win that, the loss to Ohio State looming over him. Um, but at the end of the day, I think, both of these teams survived the loss. Like Dave said, you're getting rewarded for playing this game, and it's going to end up being, at the end of the year, a measuring stick game and a game that we look back on to see, how these two teams progressed.
Grant, being rewarded for playing this game is actually a new data point in the college football playoff selection committee's formula or metrics. And I know those words are both in air quotes. When they evaluate teams at the end of the season, they are going to reward teams for playing a more difficult schedule, just understanding that there's an imbalance between a couple of the conferences in the sport. The Big Ten and SEC, obviously, being at the top of the list. They're deeper. They've got more competitive teams in there. They have more contending teams in there. They have a lot more of the star players, better head coaches. They've just got better everything right now compared to the ACC and the Big 12, which just have a couple of teams each, not so much any depth. But I want to go back to this quarterback battle that you mentioned. So, Grant, give me your thoughts on this. Julian, Sayin, and Arch Manning, which quarterback do you expect to have the better day? And I'm going to say this through the lens of expectations again, just like we talked about with the head coaches. Arch Manning has enormous expectations on him. His last name is Manning, for one, so people expect him to perform at the level of Peyton and Eli and just the family lineage that goes on. He's the quarterback at Texas. That comes with a lot of weight. He is on the road in his first start to open the season. Now, he has started games before because Quinn Ewers has gotten hurt, so he has a little bit of that starting experience. Versus Julian Sayin, he's coming into a home game with Jeremiah Smith out wide, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis, and Max Clare, plus a pretty good offensive line and a good defense, where he's expected to win the game. Now, Ryan Day has said in his press conferences, the expectation for us is just to win. That's our message to Julian. You just got to win. We need one more point than they do to win the game. You just find a way to win. That's the logic. I mean, you can't expect Sayin to go out there and be Superman. So of these two quarterbacks, who's facing more pressure in the game? And ultimately, which quarterback do you think performs better under the pressures that will be Saturday in Columbus?
How you outlined it is good because, it makes the question that much tougher because you're setting those expectations of Sayin's playing at home and he's playing, maybe with a better, at least wide receiver situation that Arch, is playing with. But, on the other side, Arch Manning, the last name, he's coming in with the expectations that are astronomical. But, I think at the end of the day, it's gonna be hard for Sayin not to meet expectations unless things go pretty awry. Like you said, the goal at the end of the day is to just have one more point than the other team. And I think that's going to be kind of mirrored in the game plan possibly this early in the year with Sayin. So I think it's going to be hard for Arch to live up to those expectations. Even if he is on the road at Ohio State, he has a lot of talent, a lot of his rankings coming up through high school. He's had a lot of experience, more than Sayin has in games. So it's going to be hard for him to live up to the expectations, I think.
Yeah, I mean, for Arch, obviously, like you said, Grant, there's a lot of expectations on his shoulders, just the lineage that he has. And now being the starting quarterback at Texas, where they're expected to go win a national championship this year, that adds pressure to it. Obviously, the lineage has prepared him for this, and it's hard to get better coaches than the ones he's had so far, not only at Texas but in his own family, of course. And so I think he'll be prepared. I do think there is a little bit of a battle scar from last year when Ohio State kind of knocked him around a little bit, knocked him out on the first play he was in, and I think that he will remember that walking into Ohio Stadium. But we'll see how long it takes him to forget And that's really what's going to be key. And then on the other side, Sayin, a lot less experience, Grant, like you said, than Arch, who has at least started a game. And it'll be interesting. Sayin definitely has the better weapons to throw to with Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis, Max Clare, etc. So that should be an advantage. Ohio State's offensive line looks to be really strong again this year after a really, really incredible end to last season. And they kind of pushed Texas around a little bit in the Cotton Bowl. And it'll be interesting to see how Texas holds up. Texas brought in 1 million defensive line transfers. Their defensive line should be really strong. They're inexperienced elsewhere. So that matchup will be interesting, and it'll kind of trickle down to the quarterbacks. And I think that both of these quarterbacks have a chance to make a statement early. I think Arch is more prepared to do so, but I wouldn't be surprised if Sayin comes out and lights it up.
David, you were mentioning these skill position players that Ohio State has the better ones, which was going to be my next point here as we're talking about the quarterbacks. Urban Meyer would always say a quarterback is a product of those around them. And I think that's going to ring true in this game because, yeah, the supporting cast is ultra vital to the success of these quarterbacks and getting comfortable and in rhythm in an environment that we will see as hostile if you're Texas or almost overwhelming if you're Julian Sayin because you're at home with the weight of the world. You're expected to win the game at your first start. You don't know how you're going to react until, again, the shoe hits leather. So, yeah, we're talking about Ohio State has an advantage at the skill positions. Which team has an advantage in the backfield, though? We know James Peoples and C.J. Donaldson are going to be in Ohio State's backfield. Maybe we're going to see a little bit of Bo Jackson. Can't imagine we do on Saturday. Then you have C.J. Baxter and Trey Reisner for Texas. Which team has the advantage there? Because I think establishing the run game is going to be something that's important for Ohio State and Texas. If you're Texas, you want to do that because if you're looking at a weakness on the Ohio State team, or maybe the area of least confidence is a better way to say it than a weakness, it is going to be on the defensive line for the Buckeyes just because of the lack of depth, not because of talent, just lack of depth. But then for Texas, David, you said they brought in 1 million transfers on the defensive line. Okay, how is that unit going to gel? Ohio State brings in some transfers on the offensive line. They're expecting it to be really good, potentially better than last year. I think it's important for Ohio State to try to test the interior of Texas's defensive line early in the game and establish the run game because that is only going to help Julian Sayin if he can work with second and manageable, third and short. That's going to be a lot better than second and 10 and third and 7 when you're looking at those teams. So of Ohio State and Texas, which team has the advantage in the backfield? Because that run game is going to be a crucial part of this matchup.
I'll chime in here, and I think it's unknown really at this time, if we're going to be honest. I think there's a lot of inexperience on both sides. And I shouldn't say inexperience. Obviously, Wisner for Texas and Baxter as well really have a good amount of experience carrying in college games. And on the other side, C.J. Donaldson does. It just wasn't at Ohio State. It was when he was at West Virginia. So I think there is experience there on both sides, but it'll be interesting to see how these running backs gel with these new offensive lines. Texas on their side has a new offensive line. They replaced, I think, 3 starters, maybe 4. And then on Ohio State's side, it's a new offensive line. Some people have moved spots. You move Austin Cerevel to left tackle, bring in Phillip Daniels. He's going to play right tackle. The rest of the line kind of stays the same. So for Ohio State, it looks a little different, but the pieces are kind of the same. And James Peoples, on the other hand, is a new running back. He carried the ball a little bit last year, and now it's his time to kind of step in the spotlight with Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins gone. So it's a little bit of a new look on both sides. I don't really know what to expect. I always say it's hard to run the ball on Ohio State, and I think that will continue. So it'll be interesting to see how Texas does. But I kind of like the Buckeyes for that reason. James Peoples electrifying in the open field. We'll see how he does. He kind of reminds me a little bit of J.K. Dobbins. That's what people have been saying. And then C.J. Donaldson, kind of that bruiser, Mayan Williams type back. So it'll be interesting to see how these backfields mesh. But I think Ohio State has a slight upper hand.
Yeah, David, the unknown is really a huge part of this game because there's so many variable outcomes. I know we talked about that on the Monday show. There's a lot of variable outcomes in this game. Texas could win the game by double digits. Ohio State can win the game by double digits. It could come down to a field goal at the last second. No outcome really in this game beside a Texas blowout would surprise me. So taking all of that into consideration, Grant, I'm going to come to you with this one. Which team do you think is going to win the battle in the trenches? I know we're looking at the unknowns when it comes to, all right, we have new pieces, new faces, all these things, transfers, coordinators, position coaches. So many factors are going to go into this game, but just overall, pound for pound, which team do you expect to win the battle in the trenches?
Well, I think, Dave mentioned earlier, Ohio State's line finished last year, with an unbelievable run, and not only that, they ran through Texas in a lot of ways. So I think Ohio State's coming in with all the confidence in the world, certainly on the offensive line. Maybe Texas has a little bit of an edge as far as what we know from the defensive line in that perspective. But I'm thinking, or assuming that at home, Ohio State's D line can kind of pin their ears back and take advantage of the momentum, assuming they can contain Arch Manning, and hopefully get some sacks because obviously pass rushing has been a bit of a topic aside from the playoff run last year. A bit of a theme in Ohio State's defense that they're lacking a little bit of pass rush. So I think overall, I think Ohio State is going to have that advantage on Saturday, but I think it's razor thin because Texas, like we always say, and how we saw last year, pound for pound, athlete for athlete, these teams are going to be very even.
Right. And let's slide to the defense. Now you're talking about pass rush and getting sacks. I think we may see 4 sacks in the first half in this game. I think the defensive lines are going to try to establish themselves early, but I think both teams are probably going to try to blitz early to rattle the opposing quarterback. David, looking at these two defenses, do you see either of these defenses as having a total complete advantage, or do you think this is going to be more a position battle by position battle, a player advantage? Where do the advantages come into play for Ohio State and Texas defensively matching up with the opposing offenses, which will be explosive? Whether or not they are on Saturday, they will be by the end of the season because of the weapons that they have and the skill all across the board there. There's a ton of talent on both of these rosters, but there's a ton of talent on defense as well. So what matchups do you think defensively both of these teams can exploit to find success on that side of the football?
Well, I think for Ohio State, first of all, it's in the secondary. I think they're really talented back there. Caleb Downs is probably the best defensive player in the country. That always helps. New starter beside him is probably going to be Jalen McClain. They feel good about him. He's been in the program for a while now and has always drawn rave reviews, played a little bit last year, so they feel good there. And then the cornerbacks might end up being better than last year with Jermaine Matthews stepping in for Denzel Burke on the outside, Davison Igbinosun a year older. So I think Ohio State has to feel good in the secondary. I think Matthews could be an upgrade over Burke there. And then I think Igbinosun with another year in the program, another year focused on limiting those penalties, could be really good for him and good for the Buckeyes. So I like Ohio State in the back end. The linebackers are kind of a wash for me, both kind of inexperienced. Sonny Styles, captain Blanco this year. He's been excellent since moving from safety. I expect him to have another big year. And then it'll be whether Arvell Reese can step into that Cody Simon role. Simon, excellent last year. Not the most athletic guy, but always in the right spot and held his own athletically. His leadership and knowledge will certainly be missed by this unit. So it'll be interesting to see if Styles and Reese, kind of that combination there, can make up for that. And then on the defensive line, I think that's where Texas has their advantage. They're deeper. They're very talented. And I think that they could really challenge Ohio State's offensive line by bringing in those fresh bodies early in the year. We'll see how both teams' conditioning holds up. Ohio State, that was another thing they were really good at last year, kind of wearing teams down throughout the playoffs. So if they can kind of hold up against that Texas D line and neutralize that threat, I think they have a good chance. But that's the matchup Texas needs to win if they want to win this game on the defensive line. They certainly can.
David, let's stay right here with Texas and talk about keys to victory. We're going to transition to this segment before we do a little bit of a new look for our picks at the end, but we'll get to that in a second. We're going to do keys to victory here. David, I'll have you give me 3 keys for a Texas victory. Grant, I'll go to you for 3 for Ohio State. So, David, give me 3 keys to a Texas victory on Saturday.
All right. Well, first one, I guess, is always limiting the turnovers. If Arch can hold onto the ball, running backs don't fumble, that kind of stuff, the team that makes the least mistakes will win the game. So that's obviously always going to be number 1 for me. Number 2, like I mentioned, is that defensive line. That's where Texas needs to win the battle. Ohio State with Sierraveld now at left tackle, Daniels at right tackle. They have two new tackles. Sierraveld obviously in the program for a while, played at multiple spots last year. They feel good about him at left tackle. Daniels started a few games at Minnesota. They feel good about him there. And then the interior stays the same. So Texas needs to exploit that with their deep, big, strong, athletic defensive line if they want to win this game. And then the third one, really for Texas, is just limiting the noise. It's going to be loud. Ohio State fans coming off a national championship, even though it's at noon, it's going to be a crazy atmosphere. And Texas just needs to kind of avoid that, just stay in their own game. This kind of goes back to limiting the turnovers, but limiting the penalties as well. That's super important. And then last year, Texas, it was just a couple of big plays that decided that game for Ohio State. The one late at the end of the half with Travion Henderson, and then, of course, the Jack Sawyer play. So limiting those big plays, if they didn't do that, they had a good chance to win that game. So Texas just make less mistakes than Ohio State, and you probably feel good about this one. Teams are pretty evenly matched talent-wise.
Grant, looking at the Buckeyes and their keys to victory, what do you see for Ohio State as far as what they need to do to be successful and win the football game?
Well, I think first, you want to see Julian Sayin get in a rhythm early, get some, maybe short completions to those wide receivers, get those guys running, get the ball in the hands of the playmakers early, because, who knows what the game could turn into if this offense really finds a rhythm and these receivers, start breaking, huge runs or, making huge catches, and all of a sudden, Julian Sayin has all the confidence in the world. Number two, though, I think you want to make sure you're going to contain Arch Manning to the best of your abilities and make him a passer, mostly because if you're Ohio State, like we mentioned earlier, in the secondary is where you're going to find most of your advantages. And if you can make Arch, make him make the throws against our defenders, against guys like Downs and Igbinosun and Styles, you would like Ohio State's chances in that situation. And then third, I think it's not only containing Arch and making him pass, but if you can get to him early, and kind of like what Dave said, if that noise and that crowd gets into it to a point where that defense is pinning their ears back, good luck. And I think those are the things that Ohio States are looking for.
David, anything to add on the Ohio State front of what they could do to earn their way to a victory on Saturday? Let's go from a coaching perspective.
Well, I think Grant kind of summed it up very nicely there. For the coaching, it's two new coordinators, and that's a big deal. A lot of people have been talking about that, and it makes sense. Matt Patricia bringing a lot of knowledge from the NFL, but not a lot of college experience. All reports have been good so far. He's meshed in well. He's doing things that the players like, and he's kind of leading them. And it's a little bit of a different vibe than Jim Knowles, and I think the players appreciate that. And then on the other side, Brian Hartline, they've tried this before. It didn't really go well. He's going to be in the box now. And I'm interested to see how much Ryan Day is involved here, especially with a new quarterback, a young quarterback, one that he kind of hand selected. Obviously, he had recruited Aaron Noland in the past, signed Aaron Noland, and then took Julian Sayin like a week later. Noland obviously has since left. He's now backing up Lenore Sellers at South Carolina, whereas Julian Sayin is starting for Ohio State on Saturday. So you'd have to think that Ryan Day will be involved with the quarterbacks again, especially with Billy Fessler in there now at coaching. It'll be really interesting to see how Day is involved in this game plan. I think we could see some Day-esque game plans that we've seen before back in the CJ Stroud days. I think we could see one of those on Saturday if things go well for Ohio State. And then if things go poorly, we know how it goes in a Day offense. They kind of turtle up. So again, if Texas can get on them early, that could be critical. We've seen it before. So no, it's going to be really exciting. I think, that's kind of the key for Ohio State and the coaching staff. Kind of got to get these coordinators to mesh early in a critical game, and it'll be a big test.
Absolutely will. And Ryan Day has said that. They want to let it fly. They want to open up the offense and let them make plays routinely, because you're not going to win a game as a turtle, which we have seen before. Just as you said, the offense turtling up. We saw that happen against Michigan last year. That's not something that Ryan Day wants to let happen again. Words are one thing, actions are another. Obviously, the game is going to dictate some of that, but opportunities come as you create them in football. So we're going to see what opportunities the Buckeye staff creates for them to be successful. And really the reason I asked that question in the direction of Ohio State was because they're replacing both of those coordinators from last season. But let's move into our final segment here, our Saturday 7 picks. I know on the Monday show, we gave you all 7 games that we picked. We're going to do 7 picks related to Ohio State, Texas. We'll do the spread, over, under, and then we'll do a couple props for you guys just to have a little bit of fun here at the end of the show. We will start with the spread. It has increased since the Monday show, so a little bit different. You're going to get 2 picks from us here. See if this impacts our answer, changing by a point. Ohio State now favored by 2.5. It was 1.5 on the Monday show. Grant and I both took Ohio State. Just to remind you, David was in favor of Texas. Now that this is at 2.5, David, how do you see this game playing out? Grant, follow him, and then I'll round us out, and we'll continue to move through the list.
Well, now I'm still not sure. That's interesting. I don't know if it's probably too early to be considered a late bet. The late money usually wins. So this will be interesting. I don't really know. I'd have to defer to the Vegas experts on this one, which I certainly am not. I'm going to stick with my pick for now. That'll change again 5 or 10 times before kickoff. It'll change when I walk in the stadium on Saturday and kind of catch the vibe on campus and see how that is, because that's a big determining factor for me. So right now I'm going to stick with Texas. That'll change. But, I really do think they're just more experienced. Arch, I think, will have the upper hand in this game. But, if these teams meet again in the college football playoff, it could totally be different. This is just such an early game. It's kind of a crapshoot. But I am going to stick with Texas for now.
Yeah, it is razor thin. Like I said, they match up so well, and a lot of early prediction, a lot of money, kind of leaning towards Texas lately. It makes me want to lean towards the Buckeyes, but like Dave said, it's a little early right now. When it gets closer to game time, who knows? But I think I lean Ohio State at the 2.5 at this moment.
David, you're mentioning vibe on campus. I remember being there for the Michigan game last year, and sure, it was cold, so everyone's going to be a little bit tense to begin with. You could feel the energy being different on campus that day walking into the shoe. You just had a feeling something was off. It wasn't the typical big game energy where it's palpable, and I think we're going to see it.
I walked in there against Tennessee, and it felt like you were kind of walking into work for the day in a sense. Like it kind of felt like it really was. So the vibe really does mean something. When I was there for Tennessee and there were all those Tennessee fans, you could just tell everybody was pissed and they were ready to go. And it'll be interesting to see whether it's kind of celebratory and lackadaisical in Columbus on Saturday, or whether these fans are ready for business, because I really do think that'll make a difference.
Honestly, I expect them to be ready for business. I think the city of Columbus knows, the state of Ohio knows. I think first and foremost, the coaches and the players know. That's what matters, really. However, the fans do set the tone. They know what's going on right now. They know Texas is coming into town. Everyone has had to hear about Texas and Arch Manning ad nauseum. If you're on the Ohio State side, I mean, just national pundits, you can say what you want, but they've had to hear about this ad nauseum. They're going to walk into the shoe. They're going to win this game. It's not going to be close in some people's eyes. I think Ohio State's going to know that, and I do think we're going to get that business-like atmosphere in Columbus. Yeah, national champions going to give out the towels, all that fun stuff, new traditions. None of that means anything on Saturday beside winning that game by at least 1 point. And I think that's what Ohio State is going to do. They're going to win the game by more than 1 point, though. I'll take the Buckeyes with the 2.5. Over under on the game, David, 47.5. So anticipating a little bit more points than we saw in the Cotton Bowl. So looking at that number, 47.5, what do you expect, over or under in this one?
A good line. I'm going to take the over here, actually. I think we could see some like 27-23 type game. I like these defenses. I think they have juice. But I do think we get a little bit more scoring in this one. Not everybody's dialed in just yet. So I'm going 27-23, one way or the other, and an over.
Yeah, I'll take it over as well. Where it's sitting right now, I think both offenses, they have enough firepower, especially Ohio State at home if they get rolling early, to surpass that. And I would say, this early in the year, you're looking at about like a 24-20 victory. I lean Ohio State.
So great. You got the under if you're looking 24-20 there. I will take the over. I think the only way this game goes under is if you get a clunker. I think there's too much talent on both offenses for it to be a clunker because I don't think the defenses are going to be in mid-season, the late season form yet. If this game was in November, I can see it being 17-14 or 20-16 or something like that. Barring some crazy turnovers where it's kind of a back and forth, kind of ugly style game, that's the only path I see to an under, really. I'm going to take the over here pretty confidently. I think we may see someone score 30, but David, like you're saying, that 28, 27, 28, 24, that style game, I think we're gonna find on Saturday. So David, then Grant, what team scores the first touchdown? Ohio State or Texas? Just real quick.
I mean, that's an interesting prop. Whoever gets the ball first will score the first touchdown on the first possession. Um,
Ooh.
so I don't know. Texas wins the toss. They will probably kick it. So Ohio State will score first on the first possession, but may not win the game.
Yeah, I think Ohio State, if they get the ball with the receivers they have, probably has the best chance to score first.
Yeah, I think the opening script for the Buckeyes as well gets them into the end zone early in the first quarter. Let's move down the list here. David, will we see a defensive or a special teams score? We saw Jack Sawyer with the infamous scoop and score in the Cotton Bowl. Will we see a play, not necessarily like that, but maybe shades of that? Maybe Caleb Downs returns a punt. What do we think here? Defensive or special teams touchdown, yes or no?
The math here says no, and I'm going to say no. Caleb Downs had one last year against Indiana, but I guess they only get it every like 10 years against Indiana only, because they just don't return kicks or punts otherwise. The defensive score, maybe a safety would be fun. But no, I don't think that happens either. I think the probability just isn't there, and I'm going to say no for this one.
Yeah, I don't think there's, much of a chance of that hitting, although it is an interesting prop, and who knows with these two teams and the athletes they have on both sides, but I'm not sure about the set.
I think I'll make something fun here. I'm going to say someone returns a kick for a touchdown. Let's just do it to be different. Jeremiah Smith over under 59.5 receiving yards. Real quick. We'll do the last three in about a minute.
I'm going to say over. I think he can get to 70 or 80 with ease. So I'm going to say over on this one, and a strong start for Jeremiah.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance he gets that on one reception, so I'm going to go over.
Wow. Big play for Jeremiah Smith. I'll take him over as well. Arch Manning over under 1.5 touchdowns, David.
Over. He can get two, I think. I'm going to say over.
I'm going to say under. They're going to end up bracketing him, I think, at some point.
I'm going to go with over as well. I think he does get two. I think one through the air, one on the ground. And then total game turnovers over under 2.5.
I'm going to say under. I think that this will be a relatively clean and safe game. And I don't think that there will be too many turnovers or really crazy plays for that matter in this one. I think this will just be some smash mouth football.
Yeah, I think both quarterbacks are just good enough and just experienced enough to keep that at the under.
I'm with you guys. I think, David, I'm with you. Safe game plan. Still good, aggressive at times, but both quarterbacks are sharp enough to keep from throwing interceptions. I think the fumbles where the dangers are there. But that is our show for Ohio State, Texas. Guys, thank you for tuning in. We're going to have live coverage for you throughout the rest of the week and the weekend. We will be live from the Horseshoe on Saturday. Wall-to-wall coverage for you guys. Make sure you guys are staying tuned to our social media at Saturday Cadence and at T Silver Bulletin on all social media platforms. We appreciate you guys listening for today's show. Make sure you're staying close to everything. We've got plenty of content for you throughout the rest of the week, plus the reactions after the game. We will see you guys from the live content and maybe some special stuff in between our next recap show on Monday. So until then, God bless.